Hello, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Hi, Nicole. I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, clear. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I shall start now if everyone is ready. Yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming in this morning. Today, I would like to share with you some information which I have gathered from seminars, from my own reading, and just an info sharing session. So if there are any questions, maybe we can just stop me and we can do a little discussion. And I'll try and make it this session very interactive. So I'll throw some questions in, and it'll be good if you can respond, whether it is through the chat or you can switch on your microphone. So I hope to make this a discussion, actually, right? Not just a presentation. So with that, I'll start. So good morning, everyone. We are today exploring the topic of carbon management, and we are looking into understanding what carbon management is all about. So to start, let's understand why the need to do carbon management. We know now there's a lot of big topics on climate change, right? And we want to know what is the impact on climate change. So why has this happened, right? This has all happened because there's a threat. The threat comes from the operations of global company. So all the companies' activities, whether they are in the industry, various industry, the sectors, the countries, they are all impacting on climate change. So this has come to what we call decarbonization, right? So decarbonization has happened because of the need to address this concern. So how do we look at decarbonization? That is where you hear a lot of what we call it, mention on net zero. So this net zero that we have, what does this really mean? Can anyone tell me what net zero is? Maybe you all have an idea you can share with the team. I'll just open this for discussion, if I may. Anyone knows what net zero is? Anyone wants to share? You can switch on your mic.
Dr. Nicole, is it?
Yes.
Until you reach your minimum carbon output, which is zero, your target is zero, or is it totally the companies produce zero carbon?
Not totally zero carbon. It's actually a net. It's a set off. Yeah, it's a set off. Thanks for responding. Sure. Net zero. I'll explain in a short while what net zero is. But because of net zero, there is what we call a need for carbon offset, right? So what we have here as a carbon offset is the need to address the carbon content that is in the climate, that is in the environment right now. So what has happened is there is a stick and carrot. The stick is there will be carbon taxes if you have carbon, all right, emission, or you have a fuel emission reduction incentive. So that is led to what we call a carbon offset demand. So coming back to my question, what is net zero? All right. First, we have to understand what is carbon footprint. So the carbon footprint is actually a total greenhouse gas in terms of global warming impact caused by a product, or whatever product that we use, whatever product that we manufacture. It gives you that carbon footprint. So it comes in the form of various gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. This is where chemistry comes in. So hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorinated compounds, fluorinated ethers, etc., etc. And is usually reported in kilogram CO2 equivalent or ton CO2 equivalent. So this is actually what we mean by carbon footprint. Is relating to your GHG, your gases. So to give you an example, what it means is that for every gas that has is in the air, the compound, the scientist has calculated, and they have done a evaluation, all right, on the impact on the global warming. So they call it the global warming potential factor. Right? Please stop me if I'm too fast, or you want me to repeat. So this factor has been calculated, and that is explained in the chart below here. Yeah. So for example, if you have carbon dioxide and you look at the impact on global warming, is 1, right? This is ton CO2 equivalent per ton gas. So if you look at methane, it's 28 times more impact on global warming compared to CO2. And in terms of nitrous oxide, is even higher, 265 impact, right? Potential impact on the global warming. So that is the impact factor. So let's say a company has done some calculation, and I look at the emission of carbon dioxide, that's 30. So on the amount here, all right, is 30. I captured 30 tons of CO2. I captured 20 tons of methane. I capture 1 ton of nitrous oxide. So I multiply it with the impact factor, all right? And this is what I get, 30, 560, 265, giving me a total of 850. So 850 is my greenhouse gas emission. So this greenhouse emission is determined, there's a question here, how do you determine the global warming potential? This global warming potential is determined by the scientists. So if you look at the source, greenhouse gas protocol under global warming potential values, you can go and Google. Under this, you can see the list of gas and the impact on the global warming potential. This has been measured by the scientists and come up with that potential factor. Okay, I hope that that answers your question. So moving on, understanding carbon footprint. Now you want to know, what is carbon neutrality? What does it mean? You hear a lot about carbon neutrality, right? So is it similar to net zero carbon emission? Answer is yes, it's similar. And net zero, my question is, does it mean to zero carbon emission? This is what Jetsha mentioned just now. And does it really mean the minimum level, or does it mean there's no carbon emission, zero level? The answer is net zero doesn't mean it is zero carbon emission, right? It doesn't mean that you don't use your car, you stop all your activities in your power plant, you stop your activities in your factory. No, it doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean that you want to achieve net zero by cancelling out all the carbon emission. So what it really means is net emission is the difference, right, between your GHG emission. GHG is your greenhouse gas, greenhouse gas emission minus your GHG removal. That's the difference. So if your greenhouse gas removal is the same as your greenhouse gas emission, then your net emission is zero. This is what it means. This is carbon neutrality, right? So when you reach that level, let's say a country, you have got plantations, you have got farms, you have got manufacturing. So you balance it, all right? And then you have the difference. And if it's the same, your removal and your emission is the same, then you achieve your net emission, which is your net zero. So can we achieve net zero, right? For Malaysia, but for some of the countries like Bhutan and all that, they are already in net zero, mainly because they have got a lot of plantations, they are quite underdeveloped. And for Malaysia, if you look at the greenhouse gas emission distribution chart, which I have taken from the UNFCCC report, December 2020, there is a net carbon emission line. You can see is the red line, right? The red line is your net carbon emission. If you look at the legends, yellow is your industrial processes, but the main part is your energy, yeah, the orange or brown part. That is from, most of it will be from your power generation. So that's very high for us. And then there's waste, that is in blue. Land use change and forestry, we normally call it LULUCF. So this is the green part, where is agricultural is brown, and LULUCF removal is green, light green, right? So if you look at it, the red line is your total net emission with your LULUCF. And you will see before 2004, we were already in net zero. Okay, so it is possible to go back to net zero. Then after 2004, you know, the energy sector, all right, our power distribution increase, power generation increase. So you can see that has led to your our net carbon emission going up. Right? So that is where we can find that our IPP plants have got that big contribution to global warming, to climate change. So it is possible for us to come down and bring that red line down to the net zero bar. Okay. Carbon management, right, which brings us to the topic today. What is carbon management? Now, to address the global warming and the impact on the climate change, carbon management is one of the ways that a lot of people are going into, right? So there are different frameworks. This is one of the frameworks which I've learned and picked up from a seminar called Road to Net Zero by Optimal Systems. So this carbon management framework centers around a few areas. Number one is your measure. First, we need to measure what are the level of carbon that we have in our building, okay, or in our country, or in our industry. So according to various sectors. And then there's, once you measure it, then you need to benchmark it against your own industry, or benchmarking it across the country, or benchmarking it internally in your own building. Next will be the reduction options. What are the options that I can use to reduce my carbon emission? And from there, next one will be the evaluation, how to evaluate which option to take on the reduction. So after we have evaluated the best option, then we implement it and monitor, and then we move on to extension. How we extend it to the people that is supporting our services, our suppliers, our vendors, etc. Right? I have a question here which asks me to explain. Explain why the 2093. Can I see the chat? Join the chat. Okay, why the emission spiked so substantially between 93 to 95? This is, you can see, is because of the land use and land use change and forestry. You can see the spike is related to that, and then your energy as well, right? So there probably has been a lot of deforestation during that time. I'm not sure why, but based on this, on your land use, on the forestry, there must have been some change in the land use as well as the energy generation. So that has led to the spike. Okay. So moving on, having this carbon management framework, it is important to understand how to measure it. All right. How do we measure? What do we measure? So there are a few things that we can measure: the type of emission, direct or indirect. So don't worry too much about it, but I just wanted to show you the type of emissions that is available. that can be measured. So direct emissions will be emissions from operations that are owned and controlled by the reporting company. So let's say talking about Apple, all right, let's use Apple example. So what are the company that is currently having the what are the operations that is currently owned by them, right? For example, from their own vehicles, mobile combustion, stationary combustion, if they have boilers and furnaces, which they don't have, all right, but there are some factories, like from plastic factories, they would have that, so they will come under this. Process emission from the chemical production, this is like chemical factory. And then fugitive emissions from the leakage. So sometimes there's leakage between in the systems. This is called the fugitive emissions. So depending on what company you are, so if it's relevant, if it's not relevant, then you will have another section which is called the indirect emission. So indirect emission is from the generation of purchase of acquired electricity, steam, heating, and all that. So all of us use that, okay? All of us use electricity, which we purchase from TNB, all right? So this use of purchase of electricity or steam or heating or cooling, if let's say if you have direct cooling, district cooling, you purchase the district cooling as well. So these are indirect emission from the district cooling plants or from the TNB. So this can be measured from that. And these indirect measures that occur in the value chain of the reporting company, including both upstream and downstream emissions. So this will include your production or purchase products, your transportation, your purchase goods, right? When you buy things from other places, your vendors. So these are the indirect emissions that we have, right? These are the examples. So these type emissions we can measure. So coming from your direct emissions just now, we have got scope 1. I'm sure you have heard about scope 1, 2, and 3, all right? So for those who are listening to it for the first time, scope 1 is usually referring to your direct emission, all right? Again, emissions, these are controlled and owned by the reporting company. So indirect emission can be categorized into scope 2 and scope 3. So scope 2 will be your direct emission, indirect emission from purchase or acquired electricity. Then you have your scope 3, which is your value chain of your reporting system. So your reporting company has got all your suppliers upstream and downstream. That will be your scope 3 indirect emission. So I hope that after this, when people talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, you have at least an idea, okay, what is it about? So this is in relating to your type of emission. So having understand how to measure your emission, you need to set a benchmark, all right? So you can do internal benchmarking, you can do external benchmarking. So if it's internal, you compare against your internal performance across time, right? Like your office, right? You want to compare your electricity consumption last year and this year. What can you do this year to vary it, all right? To reduce your electricity, your waste, for example. How can you reduce your waste? So external benchmarking is you compare against other organizations. What is the other organization doing? So if you are your plastic factory, your rubber factory, or your oil palm refinery or gas refinery, you compare against other organizations and you have what we call an external benchmarking. So you can observe what are the various options to do, what are the people outside there doing, right? Which leads us to what are the options, right? You can use in carbon management. So you have inverted triangle here. This is sourced from RMIT University. So this plan is usually, it comes from most favored to least favored option. Of course, the most favored is to avoid. So so all of us go into preservation. All right, so we preserve forests, we avoid activities that cause emission, we stop using the car, we walk, you know, that kind of thing. So this will help to reduce the waste heat and improve your heat emission. So your improving of your, what we call it, the process and energy efficiency will be better, all right? Instead of avoiding, you stop human activities altogether, and because you want to improve your heat recovery and all that, another good option would be to reduce. That's what now all of us are going into carbon reduction, right? Instead of carbon avoidance, we go into carbon reduction, and we change the activity so that it reduces less emission, right? So we try to look into energy efficiency. We try to improve the process of production. So that is how we have something called energy efficiency, which is very popular amongst us nowadays. So next favorite option will be substitute. Change the source to reduce emission. How do we change it? We use renewable alternative energy source. So that's where your solar comes in. That's where your wind energy comes in. That's where your hydro energy comes in, using renewable alternative energy source. And now the latest will be hydrogen, right? So following that, you have sequester. Sequester is undertaking activities to store emissions. So if we cannot avoid, if we cannot change to reduce, we cannot change the source, what can we do? We can store this emission and store it. There are machines now that can store carbon and convert that to energy. The more traditional one will be to replant, all right, and crop sequestration, do replanting, reforestation. And of course, the last one will be the least favorite option is to offset. That's where you purchase carbon credit, right? So if you cannot do all the above, the last thing you can do is to purchase, right? To purchase carbon credit. There's really nothing you can do, because if you don't do that, then you have your carbon tax. So there is a need to offset your emission. So far, everybody okay? Yeah. Okay. So I'll move on to the next part, which after you have implemented all the options to reduce carbon and or to change your source of energy, you extend the impact. All right, you extend it down to your value chain. So this is an example of what Apple has done. Apple's carbon footprint is huge. It's got 25.1 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So, but if you look at it, very obvious is 76% of the carbon comes from your product manufacturing. That is their downstream, right? Their suppliers. But you look at their own scope 1, it's very little, right? Because they are Apple, they don't do any manufacturing. So it's less than 1 is from the usage of their own cars, their building and all that. And then scope 2 is 0. Why 0? Because they're using solar, right? So all the electricity consumption within the building, within the company, is all sourced from natural resources, which is your solar. And you look at scope 3, they're all indirect, but this is all indirect that is related to purchase of the products, right? So the biggest will be your product use, people like us who use Apple phone, we contribute 14%, and the manufacturing side, their suppliers, right? The chip makers, the case makers, all that contribute to 76%. So that gives you an idea how it impacts Apple and how it impacts the value chain. So Apple has make it a condition to say that, look, if you guys want to work with us, you want us to buy from you, you need to address your carbon, right? Because it impacts 76% to the climate change. So if you look at it again, now you see it from a different perspective. Now you can see how global operation impact the climate change, whether it is different industries, different sectors, different countries, and going on to decarbonization and your net zero. Therefore, your this net zero has created what we call a offset demand, all right, a carbon offset demand. If not, they will have carbon tax. If not, they will have a fuel emission reduction. This is just a summary of what I have done in the first part. There is a comment here to say that I think that hydrogen is only an energy carrier, most of the hydrogen used for industrial purpose is produced from fossil fuels. So it is not really an optimum alternative energy source. Would you agree with that? Yes and no. It depends whether it is green hydrogen or not. But if it's from fossil fuel, it can be clean energy. If it's clean energy, that means process of producing the energy will have no harm to the environment. But if it's a green energy, for example, if it's developed from water, hydrogen extracted from water, then it is a what we call a green energy. So it can be green hydrogen as well, right? How does a local company footprint compare to Apple? I think it depends which company we're talking about. If you're talking about manufacturing, all right, we have got so many manufacturing factories here, whether it is plastic, whether it is glove, rubber factories, or oil palm factories, or oil and gas, the footprint compared to Apple will definitely be so high, right? So because if you look at the contribution to Apple, the biggest contributor is the manufacturers, right? So if you compare a local factory against that, it will definitely be very high. I don't have the statistics. So how Apple address the footprint? Apple monitors their usage, like for example, they track their own consumption. That is the direct on scope 1, right? So let me just go back. Question is about Apple, right? So Apple addresses their scope 1 pretty well. So they have less than 1%. So they look into their own use of cars and all that. So they have a lot of carpooling systems. They actually give a lot of accommodation near their office and all that. So I've done a little bit of research on Apple. So they are really 0% emission from electricity. They don't purchase electricity from external source. So they do everything on their own, on solar. So that's how they address. So they address it on the scope 1 and scope 2. So you can see Apple has done very well in scope 1 and scope 2. It's less than 1% in total, right? It's the scope 3 that they have to control. That's where they extend the impact to scope 3, because this is all indirect. This is based on transportation, based on the product that they purchase to make their phone. So they extend the impact to the suppliers. They make it a condition for the companies to report the GHG emission. So all the suppliers have to be GHG emission compliant. They need to report the GHG emission, and they need to show efforts, right? Their plans to bring down the GHG emission. So all of them have to go for certification. They need to do their GHG reporting to Apple, all right, and get it certified as well. So that's what they are doing. And you can see the impact that they extended to their value chain. So moving on, my next part of it is having understand all that. I hope everybody understand what carbon management is, because I'm going into carbon trading right now. It take another 10 minutes or so. So having understand carbon management. So what do we do after looking at the inverted triangle, right? When you have all that you have done and it's still not enough, you still cannot achieve your target, you go into purchasing, all right? Or let's say if you have a lot of carbon, right, and you have created a lot of carbon points, what do? You sell. So everyone has got a purpose, an agenda. So what is the agenda, right? So let's look at the history of carbon trading. For carbon trading, it started in 1997. So in 1997, about 180 countries signed the Kyoto Protocol to reduce the GHG emissions. So you can see why I started with GHG, because you need to understand what's the purpose of carbon trading is to reduce the GHG emission between 2008 to 2012. So it's over, all right? And the target was to reduce 5% below the 1990 levels. This was done before that, right? A target that was not met, unfortunately. So the Kyoto Protocol, what they did was they created 4 types of carbon credits, where each carbon credit represents 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. So you can see now, you can understand now why the measure of the global impact is in tons of CO2 equivalent. That is not CO2 just, it is equivalent. That means that you measure other gases as well. So what are the 4 types of carbon credit? The 4 types are, the first one is AAU, which is assigned amount units issued by Annex 1 developed country party. Second one is a removal unit, RMU. The third one is ERU, generated again under Kyoto Protocol. So these 3 types. Now, the fourth one is what we are currently using right now. It's called the Certified Emission Reduction, CER, and is generated from what we call a Clean Development Mechanism project activity. So I'll explain to you later what this CER is, but I'll make reference to this pretty often. So put that in mind, CER, okay? So what happens is these units are transferred and acquired across, and they track and record through the registry system. So they have a registry system under the Kyoto Protocol, and this registry system will track the number of units, right? Your ton of carbon equivalent, CO2 and equivalent. So the largest emission trading market in the world is the EU Emission Trading Scheme. We call it ETS. Established in 2005, so whereby some 12,000 plus power stations and manufacturing plants, they trade credits, all right, to meet their emission reduction target. So why is that so? Because if they don't have that credit, they cannot carry on the operation. That is the protocol. They need to get that carbon credit in order for them to meet their emission targets. If they don't meet the emission target, they cannot operate. So that is the compulsory ruling for all these power stations and manufacturing plants. So what happens is you heard of Paris Accord, right? So Paris Agreement, we always hear about that. So what is this Paris Accord? So it was signed 2015 and calls for carbon trading to be carried out on a voluntary basis. Now, it was compulsory last time under the Kyoto Protocol. So for Paris Agreement, I think there is about 195 countries that have signed to this Paris Agreement. So this means that from 2020 onwards, we will expect international carbon trading to return, right? So in the Kyoto Protocol, what happened was it stopped. I think it stopped in 2012, 2013, and then nothing happened. And because of the Paris Agreement that has come in, is kicking off again. So that's what it means. So that's a little bit of a history of what happened in the past. So referring to that, so what are we trading really? We talk about global warming. We talk about climate change. So again, the scientists have measured that we need to keep the increase in temperature to within 1.5 degrees Celsius or below 2 degrees Celsius. We cannot afford the temperature, the global temperature, to go up more than 2 degrees Celsius. That will start your global warming. So therefore, we have this thing called ETS, which I explained a little bit just now, your emission trading for carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, right? So we turn it into what we call a trading for a carbon pricing. So this is also known as the cap and trade, CAT, right? So if you see what is CAT and carbon pricing, that means the same thing. So there is a carbon pricing on the units that is traded. This is an approach to limit climate change. How do we do that? We create a market. Okay, each market has got a limited allowance of emission. So why? We want to control fossil fuel. We want to make sure that there are investments into low carbon sources of energy, such as wind power and photovoltaics. right? And lately there's been a shift into hydrogen. So this has got that impact, all right, to allow for less emissions. So all of us are aware that fossil fuels are very threatening to climate change, but it is the main driver for climate change. They account for 89% of all CO2 emission, and they account for 68% of the rest, all GHG emission. So this is huge. So there is a need to control that. So under emission trading, what happened is a polluter, all of us are polluters, all of us are. A polluter having more emission than the quota has to purchase the right to emit more. So all of us have got a quota. Each country is given a quota, how much emission they can emit. And if you exceed that, then you need to reduce it. So if you cannot reduce it, then you buy, right? So we give a right to buy. So everyone has got a right to buy if their quota has been breached. So this entity having fewer emissions sells the right to emit carbon to other entities, all right? So it's a seesaw. So you have a lot, then you sell it to those that have got not enough. So your emission trading works by setting a quantitative total limit, right? So we set a quantitative limit on all participating emitters. So the price will automatically adjust to the demand and supply. So carbon ETS, where is it traded? All right, it's traded in China, it's traded in European Union and many countries like Korea. Not in Malaysia, we don't have that yet. So in last year, September, right, emission trade allowance range from €7 to 63 euro, right? That's the change, different. So the price really ranges widely. So just to share with you, these are a snapshot of trading prices. So this shows different prices across markets. There are what we call compliance markets, which means you need to comply. There's no choice, all right? The EU, the California, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, this is compliance. So you can see the difference in prices. Voluntary markets is coming in. This is for carbon offsetting. So there'll be a lot of markets coming to set up on the voluntary section as well. So you can see they're different in prices as well. So the carbon market is now approaching $1 trillion valuation. It's huge, right? So in Tesla, if I'm not mistaken, part of the income in 2020 was huge, deriving from carbon trading. I think they clocked in about 1.6 billion, I think. Yeah, quite a lot from carbon revenue, right? That's Tesla. So which brings to us now the importance of ESG reporting. So you need that ESG reporting, you need the consultation. All of us need to understand what is carbon management, what is the impact on the E and the S and the G, right? On environment, your social, your governance. So this carbon emission report is important for us to understand the need for validation. So for us to trade this carbon or to offset the carbon, we need to validate it. What is your reduction? So whether your implemented projects have achieved the GHG reduction, whether it has achieved that carbon credit as well, right? So who are the project participants? Who can be involved? A party involved or a private or public authorized by DNA of a party involved. So this needs registration. So anyone can participate in this CDM. CDM, if you remember just now I explained, is a clean development mechanism. So they will certify you and register you, all right? So properties owner, property management company, energy efficiency service company, your waste management company, service providers, they all can participate. So this is your CDM, clean development mechanism. How does it work, right? So you have two parties here, which is your national authority. So if you want to have one in Malaysia, we have to have one designated national authority. Then you have a designated operational entity. So CMP will need to be supervised by CDM Executive Board. Right? It's supported by different panels, which addresses the methodology, how do we do it, the accreditation, the certification, the registration, and then you have a working group as well, just focusing on afforestation and reforestation, and of course, carbon dioxide capture and storage, right? So this supervise the CDM-EB, supervise the Kyoto Protocol, how it works, they monitor it, and they have meetings, and they are fully accountable. So CDM-EB will be the ultimate point of contact for the participation, okay? So you have your CER just now. If you remember, these are the units. All right, the CER will be issued by the CDM. That's why CDM is important. You need them to issue the CER for you to trade, to buy and to sell. So measurement and verification, that is important to look at the data capture and the methodology according to international standard. Then you need to submit your ESG report to your DOE, your designated operational entity. This is a registered entity with United Nations. It's not just anybody. So your certificate is issued by CDM, and application for carbon trading, flexibility of trading, whether you want to do it in local, overseas, depending on the carbon pricing, right? So you can see the different prices. Just now, it's up to you where you want to trade that. So, okay, sorry. Okay, so it's important for us to understand how we can verify the project achievement. Then once we understand how to verify that, then we can move on to your local carbon exchange or your overseas carbon exchange. All this needs to be verified and certified. So these are the sectors covered for carbon credit verification. Not all things can be verified. These are the ones under the energy sector. We have energy industries, renewable, non-renewable. Then you have your distribution, your energy demand. Other sectors include manufacturing, chemical, construction, transport, mining, metal, your fugitive emission from fuel, from production, waste handling, disposal, afforestation, reforestation, and of course, agriculture. So all these sectors can be verified for carbon credit. So it involves a few steps, which is your carbon capture, involves your data verification and your carbon counting, and then moving on to carbon trading. So carbon trading works like this. You need to first register with the standard registry. So you apply, like just now, you have to apply to the DOE, get it approved. Then once it's done, they will say, okay, fine, you get it verified. They will grant you your carbon credits. They will certify it. All right, that's number 2, right? Grant of carbon credits. First, you apply, number 1. Number 2, you grant credits. Number 3, you apply for your registration. Number 4, you start to trade in the exchange, right? So in the exchange, you have your brokers as well, just like a stock market. And you have the transfer of carbon credits once you have executed a transaction. Then there's payment from the buyer to the seller, all right? So your project developer can be your solar farms, for example, right? Can be your wind farms, can be your hydro farms. So that's how it is done. The transfer and your trading is done. And bear in mind, you cannot register your carbon credit with another registry. You cannot do it twice. So you cannot start transferring your carbon points once it has been issued to you. You cannot transfer it to just anyone. So that is the condition. Okay, so with that, just like to end my info sharing here. And I hope that it has been useful for you to understand what carbon trading is all about. How is it related to carbon management? How is it related to your GHG emission? Okay, with that, thank you, and invite questions from the floor if there's any.
Okay, good morning, Dr. Nicole. Hisham here.
Yes.
Okay, with regards to carbon trading, can you actually trade across globally, across countries?
Yes, you can. You can do that. You can cross country to China, to Hong Kong. I don't think there's any in Singapore yet. If I am sure, if there is not very active trading. So normally you try to go to a place where there's active trading, and if there's active trading, the prices will be better. So you can trade in Europe, Australia, and usually each exchange have got their own specialty. Australia is specialized in forestry. European is specialized in carbon credit for power plants, for manufacturers, etc. Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, welcome. Any other questions?
What's Malaysia's direction?
Malaysia's direction. Malaysia has implemented a few things. I think we would like our own emission exchange. I think we will be going there, but I'm not sure when. Maybe next year if we are ready. What they have done is they have put in what we call a voluntary trading market, right? But before we go into a voluntary trading market, you will need to know what is our current GHG emission, right? So which means that all of us need to be ESG aware. All of us need to be ESG compliant. So the compliance now is still voluntary. They haven't made it mandatory now, which they probably will make it so later because carbon tax is coming. Whether it's coming next year or not, it's planned already on the way. That will be maybe next year, if not mid 2024, but it's definitely coming. So what we need to do now is look around us, all right? And you can see banks are talking about ESG. Factories are talking about ESG, right? Not because it is a ruling yet, but because it's something that has been extended by the customers. For example, all right, we know that plastic companies cannot export their products because the customer has blocked it, or the custom borders have blocked it in US. They are blocking imports of gloves. Why? Because they are not ESG compliant. So these customers are our governance. Actually, when you talk about ESG, G is the most important one. G is your governance, your investors, your customer, your shareholders, right? So if your customers say like Apple, you cannot supply me if you don't reduce your GHG, right, emission. You cannot supply me if you are not certified as a GHG producer. You cannot export your things to US if you breach your ESG, all right? You don't take care of your human laborers, you don't take care of your workers' rights, you don't have proper labor policies in place, right? So all this will impact now. So your governance is coming to kick in. And then you have your investors who says that, look, if you are not ESG compliant, if you continue to use fossil fuel, then I'm sorry, I cannot be part of your company, all right? So that's where the investors will pack their bags and go. They will leave. Yeah, we have our partner companies from Japan, which has pulled out of all the investments in power plants, all right, across the world, right? It's a Japanese company. So if you know them, it's Ituchu. So Ituchu has done that, right? They have pulled out from all the power plants, and they now gone into renewables, right? So from renewables, then they realized that, hey, renewable is not really sustainable. What do you do with the batteries? What do you do with the panels after 20 over years? So they said, now, I think we want to go into hydrogen, right? So that is the direction that the world is taking. So likewise in Malaysia, we will find the impact from our investors, from our customers. You'll find that we spend a lot of time producing, but our products cannot sell because of this. And then you have bankers, right? Bankers are now asking for ESG reports from their borrowers, from companies that has got facilities with them. What are you doing to be ESG compliant? So all this is coming already, and we have that particular direction which we are going slowly but surely, but to be ESG compliant on a voluntary basis, although now, but it's definitely going to be a compliance issue. They're going to make it mandatory, especially for PLCs. Huh? Anything else? I hope that answered your question.
Good morning, Doctor.
Morning.
Doctor, Malaysia, if not mistaken, promised to make a carbon reduction in COP15, I think year 2015. And they promised to reduce carbon reduction around 40%, if not mistaken.
Yes.
Do we achieve that?
We are on the way there, actually. Let me just see whether I can share. I got some. That's a good question. Hang on, just give me a second. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, we have achieved 40% of the greenhouse emission. Just give me a second. We have achieved quite a lot, actually, Mr. Murugan.
But that is until year 2020, isn't it?
2050. Net zero is 2050.
Oh, so then we still have a time to be achieved, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, we still have time. We still have time.
Yeah. And what is the responsibility role played by the mostly the higher education sector to help to reduce this carbon emission? Because the education system must become from those, especially in the IPT, the universities have to play the role. So I'm not very seeing these things is being done in the higher institution, I think in Malaysia, not seriously conducting. Do you agree?
Not seriously conducting. I would say actually there's quite a lot of things going on, in the industry. If you look at the screen I'm sharing, can you all see?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is the national agenda, right? So universities are committed. We have got a lot of solar farms. You know, the large scale solar farms, LSS.
Yeah.
So all these are contributing to this 40% renewable energy capacity by 2035. Right?
Oh, okay.
So we have already achieved 31%. We are targeting 31% by 2025. This is the moving targets, all right?
Okay.
So with the solar farm, so we are doing something, and then there's a lot of universities trying to put solar farms in their campus as well. So they're trying to get partnerships and what we call it, investors to build solar farms within the compound, because they have got a lot of land. So number two, to reduce 45% of GHG emission by 2030. Then the targets that we have set is 60% 2035. All right. So currently, I think we have reached about 25%. As of 2021, right? We have reached about 25%. So hopefully in 10 years, we will move on to that. So carbon neutral nation by 2050. This is a net zero. Yeah. And then, of course, a shared prosperity vision. We need to look into the shared prosperity vision, how we're going to share the prosperity to across, right, the community, right? We're talking about the community now, the people, our staff, our nation, our neighbors. And then, of course, MIDA, who is implementing the carbon tax and the domestic emission trading scheme. So this is all currently in the works.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Okay. So I have a question here. How these ESG requirements affecting industry, particular Malaysian and ESG? Well, it's creating a little how to say, confusion, a little bit of panic, because most of the SMEs do not know what ESG is. Number one, they do not know what are the requirements. So there's a run around looking into this. There's a lot of people trying to understand what ESG is, what carbon is, why the need to do ESG, what is the report about. So how do we measure the impact? So when you talk about measuring the impact, that's where we need to understand carbon management. Okay, total value to date being traded by Malaysian companies. I think I don't have the numbers. But I would say not significant, right? Because this is something very new to Malaysia. Okay.
Dr. Nicole.
Yes.
I understand that the SC and Bank Negara is already aware of this ESG. I mean, I heard there's some instruction coming up from these two bodies. When will it be compulsory for businesses in Malaysia to comply to SG? When do you think?
Okay, compulsory. Bursa, from what I understand, Bursa intends to make it compulsory next year for PLCs, right? For this year, it's voluntary. So to prepare the PLCs, but I think they are saying that they're going to make it compulsory starting from next year, mandatory. So if you look at the PLC's report now, if you go to the websites, you see most of the annual reports include what we call a sustainability report, right? So it's part of that already. So mandatory wise, but for other companies, there is no mention of whether to make it mandatory, but banks are already asking for reports on ESG. So it is not by choice, but the bank is already what we call it, so-called softly requesting. All right. So when banks request, you have to give them. Why? Because one of the things that they will look at is whether you are ESG, what we call ranked. So there will be a ranking, just like our Szeto rating. All right. So you'll be a rating on your ESG. So that will determine what kind of commercial rates they give you. They probably will give you ESG rate. All right. Or they will have some ESG facility, which is only open for companies that is ESG compliant. So it's going to be a carrot and stick kind of thing again. So if you are ESG compliant, you get better rates, you get more facilities. But if you are not, then you probably have your rates, your current commercial rates raised up, or you'll be telling you, oh, you need to reduce your facility amount because you're not ESG compliant. Why is this so? Because the banks have been told to be ESG compliant by Bank Negara, right? So for the banks to be ESG compliant, they have to make sure that to extend that to their borrowers. So this is called extending the impact. So when they extend the impact, the borrowers have to be ESG compliant. Otherwise, they cannot call themselves ESG compliant. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. And
okay,
Nicole.
Yes,
I think you have done a marvelous presentation. Myself, Szeto, being the Secretary General to SustNET for this pocket talk. Question is, many people, when they want to do reporting, it is something that they have to know the knowledge of what they need to report, right? So it is just not about energy saving reporting. There are also other elements that they need to report, under the ESG, which is the social impact, the environmental impact, and also the governance impact. And many people are panicking because they don't have the competent person in their company, be it with the public listed company or be it with the SMEs. This is where we have been trying to assist people with all the awareness to make sure that they have at least one competent person in their company, all right? So that they can start to review some of the data that they have in their company and to look at what are the kind of reporting that they need to do. Mostly, people need to start with one project first so that they knew what are the elements of the reporting that to be done by one particular project. You cannot do for everything. So I think the most important thing that we are trying to let everybody be aware is that everybody now wants to come on board for ESG reporting, but they don't have the right tools to do the designing for that report. So it takes a lot of how we call not only the application, but the interest to make sure they do it right from the very beginning. So in SustNET, we provide a lot of train the trainers program. We do a lot of certification. We do a lot of upskilling for people who wants to start to be either internal competent person, or they want to become an external competent person, or they want to become trainer to other people. So this is where you can see there's a room of opportunity, right? So I think, Nicole, you have rightly hit a lot of the information to indicate there's some technical element that people need to know, but most important thing is the soft skill in management, which is the management of projects. So I guess a lot of the information shared here is just not about the data capture, but of course the originality is about the people in the company. Do they know what they need to do when they want to get into this direction? Thank you.
So with that, if there's no, sorry. Oh, there's one more question. How does this affect our tourism industry? Interesting question. Let's put it this way. A lot of times when a company is ESG, or an industry or whatever sectors is ESG compliant, you find that there's a lot of responsible companies, socially responsible companies. So when they're socially responsible companies, you mean you and I would want to know whether pollution is being taken care of, right? Pollution, whether it is smoke pollution or noise pollution, or you're talking about chemical pollution. So if a country that is not ESG aware and is not socially responsible, yes, it will impact tourism. For example, China, right? You know that there's a lot of smog in China many years ago. Now they have addressed it because they have already clamped down on a lot of pollution by factories. And it has gone so bad that it impacts the tourists. Tourists, they don't like to go there because of the smog, right? And every time they have got a big conference, they shut down all the factories. They ask the factory to shut down so that the pollution is controlled. Because if that don't, planes cannot pick off, cars cannot drive because, vision is so bad. So yes, it does impact the tourism industry. And because now they are looking into that ESG factor, they are looking into reducing fossil fuel in the factories as well. So you can see that China is doing a lot in reducing the pollution factor. So I believe that a country that is ESG compliant, who is socially responsible, will attract more tourists, and it will improve the tourism industry. That's my personal opinion.
I think for tourism at the present moment, MPC is doing a lot of work for sustainability tourism, and they have very much been aware on how to do it through us, and we are assisting them. At least now 10 of their officers going to be competent person. So I think they have taken the right direction on how to guide SMEs, especially in the service sector, F&B, hospitality, tourism, and so on. So as you say, it's not just the manufacturing and the public listed companies, it is also the other industries that are now required to do their own ESG reporting. So all in all, in the ecosystem, everyone is responsible.
Yes, agree. You're right, Dr. No. Everyone is responsible. Sometimes we think that this is just the authorities' scope of works, but it's actually us. Everything that we do at home, in our office, it also reflects on our social awareness, on our responsibility, mentality towards the country, to our environment as well. How we take care of our own waste, how we leave the aircon running when there's nobody in the office. All these little things has got an impact. This is our scope 2 emission, right? So we purchase a lot of electricity, we pay. Yeah, of course we don't, not everybody pays electricity bill. Maybe in a household will be the father or the mother, so the children doesn't see it as impacting, right? In the office, the staff doesn't see it as impacting. So, but the heart of it is the passion must lie within ourselves, to know that whatever little action, whatever human activity actually impacts the climate change, impacts the globe, as in not just global warming, but it impacts everything around us. The health factor was quite disturbing. Even the air cons around us, if we don't take care of the air conditioners, the mold that builds up can be detrimental to our health. That's why we have got so much problem with our skin. We have got skin allergy, we have got sinus, we have got that kind of muscle attack. That all comes from the bacteria from the air around us. And because we spend about maybe 16 hours of our time in an aircon, so it all seeps in, all this little bacteria seeps into our body. We don't realize it. So if we are not socially responsible to the environment and to our people around us, these are the little impacts that builds up in our body, and we have to suffer at the end. So it all begins with us.
Thank you, Nicole, for your wonderful presentation. I know time is already reaching to its limit. We have already extended our time. For those who have been following us in our SustNET Pocket Talk, the next one will be on material assessment. So a materiality assessment is part of sustainability assessment. So for those who want to know how to do materiality assessment, you can sign up for the next Pocket Talk, which will be done by a few other good speakers, and also for those who want to become a good coach in sustainability. All right, thank you very much. So Nicole, once again, thank you for your great contribution, and we look forward to have more good sessions with you.
Okay.
With that, thank you,
right,
everyone. Let's have a good picture, and maybe all of you can open up your photo so that we all can see each other and at least have a good smile. All right, Zura, can you take a picture with everyone here? Yeah, it's nice to see all the handsome men. And the pretty ladies, right?
Hi, is that Zamil?
Yeah, Zamil, you have
I see Zamil. Hi, Zamil.
Yeah, we have Murugan, we have Steven, we have Kamalia, Mas Raman, and then good people. All these people are all very strong in knowledge on sustainability, and of course, are the great people that we have not yet met personally.
Oh, I see Nolly as well. Hi, Nolly.
Yeah. So we definitely, because physically it's always good to meet each other, but once in a while we will meet. But from now on, we will use Zoom for most of our Pocket Talk, as it's more effective and it's short and sassy. Hi, Janet, and everyone. all of you have registered. So for those who want to have more information, so we can share some of our presentation slides if you are a SustNET member, and you can join in some of our great sessions for the future ones to come. And of course, you can come into as a SustNET member, you can come into our workshop, a free workshop, and also for our GPM Awards event. Thank you very much. So nice to meet all of you here and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
bye-bye.
Thank
Nicole.
you. Thank
Nice
you.
presentation.
Bye everyone.
Bye. Bye, Ran. See you again.
Thank you.
Bye, Zamil. Apa lagi yang kena?